Hello and welcome to the 2-Minute Warning. I'm your host, Perry Busby. The 2-Minute Warning is brought to you by the Westside Gazette newspaper. Joining me tonight is the co-host of 2-Minute Warning and the publisher of the Westside Gazette, Mr. Bobby Henry. Bobby, how you doing, my brother?
You know, as I always say, I'm terrific and getting better. And so in saying that, I got to step up to the plate with that. But I'm well, Perry. How about you, bro?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
You know, man, it's just so much happening. You know, Perry, maybe you and I ought to think about doing a show every day with so much stuff going on, man. Aside from this, you know, if it's not one thing, it's another. You know,
it is. It's this thing called life.
Yeah, this thing called life, man.
Right.
You know, the politics is about to heat up. You know, but we'll let that go. Your governor and his cronies in this censorship and everything they're trying to do with our educational system, man. I don't know, Perry.
Yeah, these are some interesting times we face.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Yeah, and I do believe, and we've said it, man. Our Black history depends upon our mental health, and we're being cold on every angle.
Yeah. Even more so, I would hate to say even more so now than ever, because when you consider what our ancestors went through in slavery, we are nowhere close to going through the harsh treatment, but it persists. You know, and it is up to us to keep moving this concept of democracy, this concept of justice and equality is up to us to keep moving it forward.
Yeah, we had a great show last week, man, to lead us into our Black History Month and our topics of post-traumatic slavery syndrome disorder and its ramifications or its effect. Last week it was education, and this week it's on relationships. So we should have a pretty good discussion.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was expecting, and I got the call. Can let me see if we can get this gentleman on the phone. Oh yeah, hello. Yeah, okay, here we go. Let's try it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our 2-Minute Warning. Our subject this evening is post-traumatic slavery disorder. And our panel of very special guests are award-winning journalist and publisher of the iMessenger News Group, Ms. Cheryl Smith. Also, the consulting and training expert, Mr. Guy Anthony Wheeler. And our registered marriage and family therapist intern, Mr. Ron C. Osborne.
Wait, don't leave us like that.
Please,
don't
join our host,
don't leave us.
Mr. Perry Busby and Mr. Bobby Henry for tonight's 2-Minute Warning.
Thank you. Did y'all recognize that voice? You don't believe me, do you? You know, we need to be able to laugh and have some moments of humor. And we can have, you know, those people in higher positions to allow us to do that is a plus too. Y'all look as confounded as I was when he called.
It's always a surprise.
Always.
2-Minute Warning.
Well, let's get to it.
Yeah. Well, first, welcome to our guests, Ms. Cheryl Smith of the Texas Metro News, Mr. Guy Wheeler, and Mr. Ron C. Osborne Williams. Welcome. It's a pleasure to meet. I've met some, but not all. But I'm just looking forward to sitting down, listening, and engaging in this conversation about relationships, the stress it brings, because knowing somebody will bring stress. uh, and so I want to hear. I'm looking forward to hearing from these experts uh, on how to deal not just with relationships between families, but between friends and between our kindred uh, desire for community and to move forward. Whenever we come together, there is the possibility of stress and that energy to move us forward. So I'm looking forward to hearing it from all of you all who have done uh, major work in this area, and Miss Smith, who has for years kept the pulse on the community and dealt with a community in stress in Dallas. I've lived a few years in Dallas, so I'm looking forward to it. So, Bobby, let's go.
Let's do it. Okay, we were talking earlier about Dr. DeGrue, who delved really deeply into the concept of post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Now, we don't want to get into that technical part. We want to understand if how do you and Ms. Cheryl, we'll start with you. With all due respect and courtesy, ladies first. Um, um, this idea of men and women being shaped by some traumatic experiences, and we're going to use slavery as that traumatic experience. How explain to us, if you will, from your point, what does that mean and what does that look like?
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you bright minds. And we're talking about, interestingly, talking about relationships and slavery and what slavery has done to us. The unfortunate thing is that many of us don't realize the impact that slavery has on us and how we go through life, and it affects us with problems. And when you look at how it manifests itself in poverty, the media coverage of us, and how we are portrayed, and the economy, our health, and how we live a life of stress. And so I want to touch on, because we're in a pandemic, if you will, but I submit to you that the Black community has been in a state of pandemonium for so long. We live pandemic lives. Our ancestors did, those before us, because of what we've had to deal with. And as a Black woman living in America, I say that you look at relationships, and it's funny because even before this past weekend, and there are a number of movies. One of my favorite movies of all times is Claudine, not just because of the great acting of James Earl Jones and Miss Diane Carroll and even Lawrence Hilton Jacobs or Tamu, but the wonderful soundtrack from the Curtis Mayfield and the singing of Miss Gladys Knight. Interestingly, prior to her death, Mrs. Cicely Tyson said that, she was approached about that role and she didn't take it, for her reasons, but it's one of my favorite ones. But after that movie, there was another movie that had Sidney Poitier and Miss Diane Carroll in Paris with Paul Newman, and it's escaping my memory right now. But you saw the relationships and how we deal with one another. And this is a very important discussion because I'd hope that we could see some healing going on. And you mentioned Dr. Joy at DeGrue, and she talks about the experience of slavery and the impact that it has had on us. Can we pass that down? We can pass it down like all the traditions that have been passed down, and how we treat one another, how the mother treats the son, how she treats the daughter. And some, there have been studies that say that women treat their sons better. And is that because of slavery? And interestingly, Dr. Seth Asuma asserts that, and you just think about this with all these brothers on here, and I want to hear from them on that. They say our relationships are just not working out, that we can be great friends. A Black man and a Black woman can be great friends, but because of the healing process, we don't have the best relationships. And that's why you have 52% of the Black men in America, according to a study, maybe the census 2016 a report came out showing that they've never been married, and then 48% of Black women. And then, of course, there have been the ones who have been multiple times, but you have to ask yourself why? What is happening with us? And it doesn't happen just because we're together. We bring it into the relationship. We bring the stress in there. We bring the stressors. We bring the preconceived notions. We bring all that garbage and that baggage that comes from our ancestors that was passed down to us. And I'd like to hear what the brothers say about that, because it's just not working out. And unfortunately, myself as a Black woman, I do feel that um, everything falls on us. We are the least respected. We are the least revered. And so much so, guess what? We get it from everybody else that we turn it on ourselves. And we don't love on each other as women, woman to woman, because everyone else. And when I say everyone, please don't take it as absolute. I'm not saying 100%, but overall, globally, you look at people feel that it's easier to dump on a Black woman, and that goes back centuries, and that can take us back to post-traumatic, that the peculiar institution that we call slavery.
I think you just opened up some stuff there, Cheryl. So, Guy or Ron, let's jump in and create some stuff here.
Before we even go there, I mean, because we always go at slavery, right? But we've got to understand at the transatlantic, what happened at the transatlantic, even before slavery, all right? And knowledge needs to be brought out is that the Igbo tribe that was on the transatlantic, and when they finally got off the ship, many of them were starting to fight back, okay? And when what happened is, nobody realizes this, is that most of them, okay, had that background, all right, is that they stood up and they started to fight. And many of them decided, like, look, I will never go into slavery. And guess what? Committed what we call now is may have become suicide, because they said we will not go into slavery. All right. And they realized that this tribe is very similar, okay, to the lost tribes. Yes, go back and do your homework on that. All right. And they landed in Georgia with this particular tribe. Then they went into slavery. And as a result of the slavery, the families did everything that they could to come together. Everything. Now, the families was getting together, the male and the female, and the family was getting together. But right after that, they did everything to always to disrupt the family. And I think that that's where the mental health and all these other issues start to go. And even if you want to throw substance abuse, it was even stated back at that time that they didn't even drink. Okay. Majority of them did not have any kind of drinking kind of problem, and they were trying to do, but everything that was done based upon the policies and the laws, the racist policies and the laws that was in place, even after slavery, when they walked out of slavery, all right, when they was trying to go and be in the neighborhood, they would take them back to jail, captives, and put them back to work. So the policies and the laws that start to come in place start to impact this. And then you start to go all the way up to the 50s and the 60s, and the laws start to change. And then when they would not let the Black man in the household, and based upon the Nixon policy that started to come out to start saying that they didn't want the Black man to be in the household because they were setting up this whole welfare. All right. So all of these things have happened to break down the mental health of the family when you started to remove the man out of the household. And once they set up policies not allowing the man to be in the household, all right. And then when what we really don't like to talk about is that in the process of segregation, our businesses did extremely well. Health-wise, we did extremely well because we were together. We worked together. Our businesses, our schools, our thinking, the way we looked at stuff. Culturally, we worked together. So the breakdown of the family started to, and Martin Luther King started to say about it, hey, we might be running into a bonfire, which we ran into a bonfire. And I don't think we were totally equipped, prepared for what Martin Luther King told us we was going to run into. So I think, and I want to expound on some other things, but I love to hear the other brother because being another therapist as well coming to the table, but there's an enormous amount of issues that started to go on based upon the racist policies, all the things that was happening before slavery, even after slavery, and then how we were getting along, and even into the breakdown. And I would like to talk about a little later is that the issues as what we're dealing with now is suicide. But go ahead, brother. I like to hear from you.
Real quickly there, I don't want to lose the point on that. What you said was exactly what James L. Jones said in the movie Claudine.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about how it took the man out of the household.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, okay, so I'm gonna look at this very therapeutic. Well, in mindset, I think of first therapeutic, but I think of when you think about learned behavior, and I think that one of the issues that we have as Black people in America is that we want to put ourselves in a monolith. We want to make ourselves one group of people, and I think you're absolutely right, brother Guy. This idea we have to go back before slavery and look at the mid-Atlantic slave trade, but even before that, where did all the people who were in the slave trade came from? Mm-hmm. We sometimes forget that Africa is not a city or a little state. Africa is a country, mm-hmm. a continent with countries, and people came from all of those different countries who had different cultures, nationalities, traditions, values, religions. And then they all were just put on a boat and was sent to America and told them that they would be this. And I think sometimes what we want to do is compare ourselves to our oppressor. And sometimes not realizing the oppressors all came from the same place. So they had some of the same values and some of the same issues. And they didn't, at some point you said this so clear that group of people decided, I'm not doing this. We're going back in the water or we're going to fight. And then there was some people who weren't from that tribe who said, well, we're going to just have to deal with what we're going to deal with because that's not our nature. That's not the kind of people we are. We don't have that kind of tenacity in us. And that sometimes really weighs into the idea when we look at now present day, how our relationships operate. We sometimes forget the vast variety of who we are as a people. And we keep putting ourselves into these narrow boxes, trying to fit into an oppressor's mindset of what we should live and how we should live in this country. And that's where some of it, when we start really looking at the root cause. I think you guys did an excellent job, both of you, breaking down the historical, as I would call it, hysterical reinforcers of killing the Black family. Mm-hmm. I think the Black family has been killed from the beginning of this. And reinforced and the reason why you want to kill the Black family, I think that we talk about the mindset of slavery, is because if you kill the Black family, they can't be the same as you as the oppressor. You can't look at a family like your family and say, this is a family, I'm a family. You have some similarity. You want to say they're not a family, they're not human, they are not anything like us. And so that is now. And we have been, I think people forget that we have been in bondage longer than we've been free. And in my therapeutic world, someone who has been in treatment longer than they've been out of treatment is always going to resort back to the mindset of them being in treatment and trauma. And so that's one of the things we really, I think when we really talk about where we're at right now in our relationships is us being able to recognize that we even have trauma. Because there's some people think they're perfectly fine in America and they've been fine their whole life and their generations have been fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, and I jumping in here because when you talk about that trauma that we're dealing with, I think more and more people are speaking out and they're realizing that they have some issues. And then we're seeing that even as we see the suicide rate and we see
Mhm.
some things happening, there's and this isn't about the relationship part of this discussion, but in a way it is, because you have a generation that really seems, if everything has fallen down on their shoulders, they can't cope.
Mhm.
They can't cope with the normal things that we have coped with. And the interesting thing is that when you look at what we've been dealing with, it's easier for us to fight one another. And we have to stop that fight. We have to stop fighting one another, and we have to embrace one another. And I say that in a sense that how we go hard
Mhm.
at each other, because that's the closest people we can get to. I love to use and I considered him a friend and vice versa, but Mr. Dick Gregory, he used to talk about all the time. He'd say people were saying we got to end black on black crime, and so he said, okay, well, who do you want us to kill, and that was a question for people who were saying we had to put it in, not black people but other folks, and it caused people to think, but you hurt those who are closest to you. So there's so much hurt in the home. And I talk to more and more young people, and I'd like to hear from you, Ron, on this, because there's so much hurt and people don't know how to articulate it. And some things that wouldn't have bothered us growing up, I've seen some people literally crushed because they got called nigger.
Mhm.
Well,
And if you call me that, I'm from Jersey. There's a different kind of response you're going to get from me, but I'm not going to go home ready. Oh, I don't know what to do. But are people able to cope better? Or did we put them in a position, or did we get comfortable and now they are younger, not in a position to cope with the societal ills that we have to face?
I mean, if you want me to answer, I mean, my true feeling is that desegregation was the pill that changed our life. We
Mhm.
thought we were
Me.
getting because the idea of desegregation was this idea that we were going to get what the oppressor had. So the person who has been oppressing us, we're going to get what they had. We're going to be equal to them, and we didn't get that. What we got was our dollars being taken out of our community, brought into their community. And then by bringing our dollars in our community, it began to say that, oh, if you have a certain amount of dollars, you are equal to us, or we will tolerate you, and you can be accepted to us in a way. And we have a large generation of people who have this idea that because I can do dollars with you, that I can be in your space. But those people still don't want you in their space. If you really evaluated the segregation that we have today, compared to segregation during desegregation, we ain't almost the same. Ain't no real big difference. They just every time we move into the places they move, they find another place. Listen, you take Fort Lauderdale. All the city of Fort Lauderdale are gonna be completely white people living downtown Fort Lauderdale. And all because all y'all moved out the way they moved at. And Miramar, South out west, and Coral Spring. Next thing you know, and then you're gonna be saying, well, why we living out here and it seems like our neighborhoods are not good. We want to move back to the corridor. And so we have to begin to wake up on ourselves and say we have to, as somebody would say, we would have to lean ourselves off of the breast of our oppressor and begin to look at ourselves for self-efficiency that we did have. And when we had it, it was a sad time when we did have self-efficiency because our oppressor noticed it, and then they said they can't have these things. So Jim Crow, slave codes, all of that, they would just come and take and do whatever they could do and destroy what we had. And now we're looking, the younger, and you hit it very well, Sister Smith. The younger generation are always complaining about, white people, what they said to me is the person of microaggressions. What I say to them is, I ain't never got no problems because I'm only in a community of people who love me. In the community I'm with, the people who love me in my own space, I don't ever have that problem. Maybe I might have a little problem that I got to share a little bit more love and let my brothers know that I'm not going to be aggressive with them, and we don't got to be the fisticuffs. That I love them, and I love them in a way that don't take my difference as saying you are not less than me or I'm greater than you, that we have to come together and we got another common enemy, even though the enemy is not doing the things they did in 1930, 1940s.
It's worse.
They are doing it in a more intellectual way, and I have to align with you in that way. So, if we do have a generation who feels like they are part of this melting pot, when we're still never really going to be a part of the melting pot, because we are in the Constitution, it was written that we never would be. It's an amendment who makes us a part.
Okay. If I can do this, let me do this. Can you bring up that comment, Ariel, about from Miss Anna Henry? Okay, here we go. Anna says, we have to be taught how to accept rejection and despair. Okay, now, do we need to be taught that from each other, or is this something that we have to deal with from them? Where is okay? So
I'm trying to understand that. Anna, that's a good question, because I was dropping Ayana off at school, and she was sitting in the car, and I'm just trying to understand this 16-year-old, and she said, I just don't like to be told no. And I was like, if you don't get yourself out of my car. And I was trying to understand that, and they don't like to be told no. They don't understand, because we've tried to give them everything, but even still understanding, just, I know, and for me, fortunately, I was a little bit athletic. So have all of you, some of you are younger, so you may not know of this, but they had gym or physical education classes, and the teacher would pick captains, and then
everybody didn't get a ribbon.
No, they were pick. And so if I was captain, I got to pick, and I might say, well, I want Perry on my team. And so you're standing there, and the ones who haven't been picked yet, and you don't want to be the last one, but somebody got to be last. Well, these young people today, they took that exercise out of the school because it was damaging the esteem of the young boys and girls. My position, if I had been a teacher, is whoever was last that time, the next time they be the captains. But I'm not going to say you don't get, the rejection. Maybe you need to up your game, or maybe you have to know what rejection feels like. And I know I didn't just get a trophy because I was on a team. We didn't play that. But we have set that up, and we have set up a lot of parameters for our young people. We have, Bobby saw me on campus, and he may have come up and pulled my ear. And I said, oh, he just liked me. But then nowadays, if you walk up and pull somebody's ear, you likely talk about the microaggressions. You like to have an assault charge against you. You're bullying. There are so many things that we've lumped into the sensitivity or lack of sensitivity of an experience, and we turned it into something that we've sexualized our children. Now, I was watching a little kid on TV bouncing, but someone saw my little grandbaby bouncing, and they were like, look at her twerking. Bouncing and twerking means something different, and it says something entirely different. And I said, do not sexualize that 2-year-old. But that's what we're doing, and that follows into the relationships and how men and women, how boys and girls grow up, and how they treat women, how they treat men. And that's really important for us to really understand how we are responsible. All of us here look like we're in an age group where we can say we're in an age group where a lot of us are more educated than our children are, because we got what people who were not educated wanted us to get. And then we get the education and we come back, well, college ain't for everybody. What the heck? What the heck? Sitting on my couch every day ain't for everybody either. Hanging on the corner ain't for everybody. Try that too. Try getting into college then. but we are telling folks that. And you shouldn't even get me on that because I'm still amazed at the Black people who will send their kids to a no-name Rudy Poot white school before they choose an HBCU. They
Well,
don't.
And they are hold on. And most of them are HBCU alumni.
You say
Yeah.
that? You think so?
No, listen. This
Don't get it twisted.
it goes exactly into the mindset that we have been the inclusion of us into white society has made us now become them, and we have taken on a lot of the inferiority. Listen, let me just think about some of the things that's happening. You said very clearly, Sister Smith, that everybody got to get trophies. Listen, we ain't even got a football team at our school in the black neighborhood, so we ain't even think about no trophy. It's integration into white society, saying we got to have this. We can't even learn about the brutality that their ancestors did to the other black kids because it's gonna hurt their feelings too much. They have to be affected by thinking of how the brutality that affects somebody 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And the reality of that is, again, we have begun to so much integrate into the white society. A lot of this, and I think so much of it is still some of this inferiority complex of feeling that we are not Black, we are beautiful, empowering, that we have things of our own that we should be highlighting. And listen, I went to HBCU. I went to a PWI for graduate school. But one thing I can tell you right now, my experience at my HBCU was down. It was hard. It was rough. It was poor. But it was the best experience in my whole entire life. What I didn't already know about me being a Black man and about Black women and having a Black family, I learned every other bit of that there, and it prepared me for the rest of my life. But here we're focusing, and you just said it. These parents they're not concerned about that. They're concerned about their kids fitting into this capitalistic society that we live in today, that they can move to the nice neighborhood when they graduate. Just think, Sister Smith, you said something powerful when you said we struggled hard, we was forced to go to school, we knuckled and buckled, and then we turn around and tell them, oh, you ain't got to go to school. College not for everybody. College wasn't for me. But my behind had to go. I'm better for it.
And it didn't kill you. And that is the point, even as we look at as women, which my message, and you all should be able to relate to it. When I talk to young ladies about going to college, and so when you get to campus, I said, and you meet guys, tell them two things. Tell them you're here for two reasons. Tell them that you're here to get a degree and to get a husband. And that will send them running because they are not looking to be a husband. And you tell them this so that they, because y'all don't even want to waste your time on that guy. I know you tripping at the bit.
That's true. But I think we need to start talking, if we're going to stay the focus in as relates to mental health, is that we as a people, how we address mental health. And back then, you got to understand 30, 40 years ago, how we addressed it. All right. We dealt with it from a spiritual kind of concept, no matter what the pressures were, the trials, the tribulations of all the things that we were dealing with, is right. We found spirituality as a core of how we were going to deal. So, and another thing is, how did we deal with when we had those kinds of pressures? If you came to a family member and said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving here, going here, and it's like, well, you stupid ass, go ahead and kill yourself then, because that's how we dealt with it, because we had a sense of survival, that we were going to make it no matter what was going on, the trials and tribulation, that spirituality, faith, and what we believed in family, we believed in our community, and everything was done. But I think our kids came under the illusion that everything was going to be fair. Most of us knew that life, it was not going to be fair. Mm-hmm. And my term is, fair is a monkey in a zoo that throws shit at you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Life is not fair. And our kids became enabled. All right. They had a sense of entitlement, and they assumed that there was no racism and all those issues that was not going on. And now with the breakdown of what's going on with our kids, you got social media that is going on. We got drugs start to go in there, drugs in our community. So all of these things start to play out of how we start to address our issues. And my fear is that what we're dealing with now, particularly kids between the ages of 14, 17, I just did a training not long ago on suicide in the African-American community, and I am alarmed between 14 and 17, okay? And even sometimes even 13. In this country, Black kids are killing themselves. Here's two other factors that we've got to understand. When the Black man started going to prison in the 80s, and guess who's been going to prison for the last 10 years? Black women. So if Black men have gone to prison, now Black women are now going into prison, right? So guess what has happened to the family? The kids are being reared a lot of times, and not all, and I want to say absolute, by this social media, which is a lot of times is a lie in the propaganda box, which happens to be the lie box. So I think we need to go back to the basics of building up our own community and our thinking, our spiritual realm of how we end up going to do anything, and resolve it from that particular end. Because unless we provide mentors for our girls as well as our boys and find our relationships with each other, we still waiting on Mr. Charlie. Mm-hmm. I think we still waiting on Mr. Charlie, and we've been here 400 years and we still waiting for something to change. It is incumbent upon us, and it becomes incumbent on us. It's not going to change. So that's my opinion. No,
and you said something. I want to go back a little bit. Guy, you said seeking therapy. Back in the day, to find a Black therapist, or psychologist or psychiatrist, to find one of those was extremely difficult and expensive. So therefore, we didn't go seek help, if you will, because first of all, it was a white person. Second of all, your parents say you don't discuss what happened in this house. You don't talk to nobody about that.
What you say here, stay in this house.
Yeah. So now we have to. We're forced to deal with this. Earlier there was no outlet, no appropriate outlet or engaged in therapy, if you will. So all of this is becoming compound. Okay. Now there's no men in the house. Can't get no therapy. Now so what are we to do? How do we combat all this? How do we deal with this? And Ron, I'm gonna ask you that question.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is really all the campaigns that we're looking to plan and gear for, we need to be running a campaign for Black families. We need to be trying to unify. And listen, I think that Sister Smith shared that, and I'm doing the training right now. 40% in 2015, 40% of births were non-marital, right? 74% of those was Black, and 72% were Black, and 54 were Hispanic. So we're looking at that population. These relationships compared to white counterparts were still connected. They were still connected, but they weren't families because so many social factors wouldn't allow them to continue to be families. We have a child support system that will mandate that a father pays child support, but not mandate he spend time with his children, or even allow him to be able to spend time with his children. And these little small things are the things that could change, but it continues to look like we got the same slave plantation owner mentality of keeping the family separated. This idea not allowing fathers to be with their children and saying that, hey, if you let the father come around and you let him do these things, we're gonna cut that money off when we know you need help. So and I say this all the time, you can have a poor Black family struggling. No one cares about them. Nobody cares if they're sleeping in their car, if they're homeless. But the second that they separate, someone is saying that, where's the kid's father? He need to be providing for all those kids. And we're going to give you a little bit of change, just so you can survive enough. And we're going to try to get him. But they was already poor. Where's this man who couldn't probably support? And he couldn't support not because he didn't want to. We got to also remember the system. You go to a job and you put down anything about you stole a Jolly Rancher out of the store when you was 14, you ain't getting no job. unless we have black businesses who want to give people second chances. So there's a lot of issues that are causing us. And the biggest thing, I mean, you said something about, therapy back in the day, but nobody was going to take you for therapy. See, we like to look at everything today like what we could have. Most of the stuff that we have access to today, we couldn't get none of. Most of the studies was used, the therapists and the psychologists was using the right studies to talk about how inferior we were and how we couldn't maintain, how we couldn't get a good education, how we couldn't be learned, we couldn't be taught. So today we have a lot of resources, but again, why do any resources if I can go on social media and social media tell me that I'm great, I'm super, I'm equal to the other people around me, I'm equal to everybody. When in reality, that's not true because we're still unhappy. I'm very unhappy. Matter of fact, I'm on social media talking about my.
Oh gosh, he was on it too. It's interesting, doctor. We talk about therapist, Dr. Naeem Akbar, who was right there at Florida State University. He talked about, you talk about this relationship thing, and I want the brothers to think about it while I make this point, because I'm just saying, if you were at home with your female significant other and your son came home and said, Cheryl's pregnant, I'd like to know what your response would be to that. And that takes me to the point Dr. Akbar talked about. He said, we have to we have to make the community our family. We have to love our family. And so what do you see? He said, when you see these brothers on the corner with their pants hanging or whatever, and they are just hanging out, chilling and everything. You ride by, you say, tis, 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 look at them, whatever you want to call them. And he said, but what do you do when one of them shows up at your door to see your daughter? If you didn't care about them when they were on the streets, some of that is going to come home to you, I guarantee you. And so what would you say if if your son came home and said, Cheryl is pregnant? Now, unfortunately, because of the way women have been socialized and conditioned, and I'm talking about a lot of Black women, they immediately question whether the child is their son before anybody else does. And that sets up a pattern and sets up how they feel about it. Because if a woman is telling you that that baby may not be yours, these are women, and it's like, where's the compassion for women? I taught at Paul Quinn College, and a young sister came to class, and we had open discussions in class, which it was really interesting, because when I would ask who was, and this was a multi-racial class, and there were whites, Latinos, and Blacks, and the Blacks were the least likely the brothers to say they wanted to get married. But the sister came in and she said, Professor Smith, I'm pregnant. I said, oh yeah. I said, are you and the baby's father still together? And she said, that dog? I said, okay, wait a minute. I said, was he a dog before or after you laid down with him? But where did she get that behavior from? So we had a discussion about it. And then another guy said, well, I'm going and see my sperm donor. And I said, excuse me? I said, do not refer to your father as your sperm donor. I said, you got that from your mom. And that's where, when you talk about those relationships and the generation, how it keeps coming down, you keep passing it on. So don't repeat that I said this. And I'm going to say that you doctored the tape, Perry and Ari and Bobby. But he was talking about, I said, listen, he was talking about his dad. I said, listen, meet your dad, have an opportunity to form a relationship with him. I said, your mom should not. I said, whatever happened with them, I said, that's grown folks' business. I said, plus your mom may not have told you
Everything.
how they got together to even make you. Now, I'm not saying your mama's a 304, but I said there are 304s in the world, and many of them had children. So I said, so just, Bobby, you don't know what a 304 is?
A 304?
Yes.
No, I'm a Southern guy. What's the 304?
Does anybody know what a 304 is? Where if you write 304 and you turn around or whatever, it looks like HOE.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so but
304.
I'm not saying
That's
that
social
all.
media.
Mhm.
I
These guys
said,
not on social media. They don't know that stuff.
oh,
They don't.
well,
They
this
got to
was
be on
before.
Instagram to know that stuff.
Mm.
And this was before, and I knew this, but I said, I'm not saying that. I said, but you don't know how it was made. I was always taught, just like keep it in the house, I was taught grown folks' business. That is grown folks' business. You don't need to be talking about your mom. You don't need to be talking about your dad and how they got together, because some of it's embellishment or lies anyway. And I say that to say that women are passing down information to their children. They have absolutely no business, because they are right there with the children about their fathers. And then the fathers, you can't be mad at the child for calling a woman a B when they hear daddy calling mama a B. And as a noted doctor, educator, and it skips my mind right now, but his young brother had school up north, and he talks about Stephen, it'll come to me in a minute, but
Stephen Perry.
yes, Stephen Perry.
All
He
right.
talks about how he saw how young boys start treating their mothers bad. They start treating their mothers bad when their mother would have a man in the house that mistreated her and disrespected her, because you can't let this man beat on you and call you a B and all this stuff at night, and then everybody goes to bed and they hear things coming from the room, and then the next morning the mama up smiling and cooking bacon and eggs for this man that was calling her a B the night before. All of these things have an impact on our children, and that behavior, the disdain for women and men that we deal with, getting back to your topic of slavery. But our minds are enslaved, so we have to decide, how do we heal, and do we count on just the professionals to heal us? Because, and I'll close with this, Dionne Warwick, I was interviewing her for the paper, but I was doing it for radio station also. And so folks told me she couldn't meet for my airtime. So they said, ask her questions. I said, what questions do you want to know? They said they wanted to know about the psychic network. Why was she so big on the psychic network? Okay, when we talked, and she's a Jersey girl too, and I grew up right around the corner from her, know her family. She's related to Whitney, Sissy, Houston, that crew. And she said, think about the society we live in today. We don't talk to each other. And that was over a decade ago. We really don't talk to each other and have those real conversations, because the conversations are held on social media. And those are not conversations, and that is tearing down our communication. How many of you, I don't know about you, but if I had children and we walk up and I introduce them to somebody and they do this, look up and go back to their phone, we got a child abuse case on, because you will not disrespect, you will speak to people, but we're not conditioning our people to do that. So we need to have a mental health explosion. If we need to, everywhere we go, we need to be saying, this is wrong, this is not the way you do things. And don't tell me I'm being microaggressive, because I tell you what you have on is inappropriate and I'm body shaming you. Put your body in some clothes.
Yeah. So why? No, not why. What is preventing us from doing that?
You scared of the man, just like we were doing slavery.
But also a part of it is, and let me share this with you. When I see families and couples, before we even get into anything, I have to remind them that whatever issue you're already coming in this room with, that you think that you're having a problem with, you already have an issue on top of that. Just being Black in America. That's the first thing I let them know. And then at that point, they're looking at me kind of odd, like, this is not what we came here for. But then I begin to ask them about the problems that they're facing, and I educate them, and I think give them the awareness and the empowerment of, you don't like how you feel like the father kind of is with you, but not with you. He don't want to commit. He don't know how to commit. And I said, that could be learned behavior, transgenerational learned behavior, all the way back from the beginning of us coming to the country, because we weren't taught to be a family. There was a book said marriage is for white people. And that book, and when I read it, and I realized in a valid point, when you begin to break down, you understand that the dynamics of how marriage worked was for white people. And sometimes we try to go into this, but it's hard to go into something when you're still broken. You haven't really faced some of the issues that you really have going on. The majority of Black people, when they get married because they're having a baby. There's a small percentage of people who plan to get married, live together, be together, get to know each other, have their own personal relationship as man and woman together, then decide to have children. The large majority of us, when we're getting married, is almost shotgun marriages. And then even today, we're not even getting shotgun marriages because people just had a baby and say we're gonna work it out, and then it never gets worked out because we still dealing with some of our issues with our own self. Look at the young man. The young man who killed his daughter, killed his girlfriend, right? And I watched this tape over and over again. I watched it over and over and over again because I wanted to hear and try to hear is why he was doing this. And he was doing it because he didn't know how to be in this relationship. Whatever issues he had with the mother, he felt that it was easier to kill her than to try to operate and work around in the system, because he felt like he was so trapped and probably alone, because who else was talking to him? Anybody else was talking to him, telling him, man, forget that, man. You're on this. No one was saying, brother, what's the most important thing here? Not you, not her, but the little boy that's now left with no parents. But who's telling the kids? Who's telling anybody that? We're really saying about us. What about me? We got the dream girl syndrome. What about me? What about what I want? Forget about everybody else. And that's what we're failing as Black families.
Yeah.
But we got to educate the Black community because we're still afraid to talk about mental health. We don't want to talk about schizophrenia. We don't want to talk about depression. We don't want to talk about the anxieties that go on. So until we start to address it, because it is still taboo in the African American community, we'll talk about everything else, but we do not want to talk about that at all. And we need to start talking about the epigenetics, because if we are going to connect this to post-traumatic slave disorder, the epigenetics of the family kind of situation, of the trauma. So we've got to go back and connect all of that together and see how that played out in our families and start to take a very serious look at what actually is going on. Another point is that we don't know ourselves as Black people. Okay, we still look at ourselves as a slave kind of component. And I mean, who are we? Okay. And until we start seeing ourselves as the Nazarenes, who are the people who came into Savannah, and look at their last names and everything else, is that who are we? Until we get to that understanding of believing in ourselves, loving ourselves, and taking care of our own self, we will always be in this situation. I have been, doing therapy work for over 20-something, 30 years, okay, and working with it, and particularly with focus on substance abuse, and many times those kind of family issues that we need to get into and start to address, especially that issue as relates to an enormous amount of depression, those underlying secrets that goes on in all of these kinds of families, and the substance abuse that's going on. We in America right now, we're here in Broward County in Florida right now, majority of the community that is around, we're dying of fentanyl in this same community that I'm in right now in Florida, Broward County, and a disproportionate amount of them are people of color. And we better wake up, because this drug problem has not gone away. So it's augmented with mental health stuff. So we've got all these dually diagnosed patients, okay? And then the kind of therapy that we're talking about is, forgive me for being very candid with you, is seeing a therapist who is culturally competent, okay, is essential and is needed, okay? And then if you don't go to somebody who understands those trials and tribulations as relates to culture, you can get that colonialized therapy all you want to, and you will be lost. I remember being in graduate school, and here I was working at a major drug program, and I told the professor that I wanted to talk about spirituality. And he says, oh, Mr. Wheeler, don't you bring that up here in my class. Don't you ever talk about, okay. But history shows that good orderly direction, research shows that Andrew Newberg, many of them authors are talking about good orderly direction, how God has played a role in spirituality in helping the Black family address a lot of those issues. So we've got to go back to the basics, and our churches need to start talking about mental health as well, because we're running away from it. We're hiding from it, especially Black men. I'll leave you with this. Black men, we don't like to say we'll say we down and I'm frustrated, I'm mad, and I just need to smoke me a reefer and some hen dog. No, your ass depressed.
Hey, check this out, guy. You said something. If we could bring that comment back up by Miss Beeson. It was very okay.
Yes.
There it is. Black families deal with different levels of stress. I believe most of which has been transported from generation to generation.
That's right.
It was not dealt with realistically because of what the Joneses, might say.
Mhm.
The stress is therefore internalized and exhibited through behaviors such as domestic violence, murders, suicide, the inability to function in society, etc. It was unheard of to seek therapy. Most of us were told to just pray about it and give it to the Lord. Now, on that point, if you don't know Ms. Beeson, she's a nurse. But anyway, on that point, guy, we all know that church hurt. There ain't nothing like church hurt.
True.
So I just want to bring that up. We were told to deal with it. And Perry, you're a preacher's kid. What's your comment?
Well, I've been listening. I've been good and quiet and just taking it in. But to Cheryl's point, to a lot of what Cheryl said, I'm reminded of Dr. Kwanzaa Kanjufu, who says that we love our sons, but we raise our daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about that, when you look at that dynamic, our Black women see what our Black men have gone through over the years. They love their sons. They've seen their sons snatched from them. When they get their daughters and their daughters come along, they begin to teach them the dynamics of how to sustain this, because women are pretty much have been the bedrock of our families. As men have moved around, the mother has always been there.
We've had to be there. We've had to be there.
Talking as a preacher's kid. As my dad tended to the community, my mother tended to the family. And so as we begin to look at this, and I know that we've sort of talked about family from that adverse side of where it's torn apart. But what about the family that is stand together, that is by tethers, still not looking for the assistance they need because they don't see it as mental health? We have gotten into such a survivor mode that we don't tend to look at this. I had a friend to tell me, he said, when you think about how we as a people have elevated in the last 60 to 70 years. And when you think about a skyscraper, in order to build up, you got to have a wide foundation. We didn't have a wide foundation. All of a sudden we got hit, and all of a sudden we started this vertical rise after the 60s. We got CEOs, we got these advanced degrees, we started moving, but we didn't have much of a foundation to build that on. And that is sort of where we're at. We talk about these kids, but these are our kids. All this happened on our watch.
Brother Perry, I will push back just a little bit on that. Sure. I think the major part that we really neglect the most important time of our history as Black people in America, during the teens, the 20s, the 30s, and we at some point we always we go to the 60s and say, oh, look at what happened. But we really had high esteem. We had our own communities. It just wasn't equal to the white man's communities. And
Right. No, right.
when it was equal, they would come over and destroy it or find a reason to find the owner, the black man who owned the business, kill him, or kill some more of the black people in the community, and left black mothers to have to raise 7 or 8 kids. So some of this we have to remember. Sometimes we say things, but we got to look historically at how things happen to us in history. And sometimes it was like Superman came and saved us in the 60s, but we weren't really saved. We were given fake gold. And if we would have kept this idea of maybe we don't want to be equal, we just want you not to come and kill us no more. That's all. Right. We want you not to be able to come over the tracks and say that John Poe said something to this white girl, and so you about to kill all the black men that's in the community. That's all we wanted. Because back then, because even in our communities had everybody living in it. Our communities today, right on the corridor, there's no more doctors living there, no more real school teachers, no more, those people don't live there. They live somewhere else. And they have left everybody to suffer for everybody else to have to suffer without role models. And so the community as a family has kind of been separated because we would like to, move with, as I think the person wrote, move with the Joneses. The Jones, we want to be with the Joneses because we don't want to stay down in this.
Check this
out.
out.
And so and I was saying, no, not to excuse the 30s. I was to clarify, if you look at our meteoric rise in mass from say the 50s to the 60s, I mean, we got open to better, you had affordable, you had the Voting Rights Act, you had the Civil Rights Act, you had can't even call it the name of it. But when you begin to look at that, now we had access to better housing, moving around. And the first thing, when I look back coming from Southeast Texas, if you came from a family of means, they were telling you, get out of here. And so in that, get out of here, you eventually moved, and what was left of the community was the remnants. And when and you start looking at some of our communities, they went down because what was left was the remnant. Everyone else who had something, who could extract something, took it and planted it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Not in mass, but I'm just saying part of that has been the problem. And so how do we address, I think one of the things, as Guy was saying, how can you you can't do anything unless you know yourself. And how can you know yourself if everything you define yourself by is things? We in this bling, we in the social media, we in all of this thing, but it's never anything that's concrete and tangible to us. And I think that a lot of that is what we fed our kids.
Okay, I want to bring back up Mr. Lightborn. Mr. Light, Lionel said number one is mental, and Lionel, you probably came on the show late. So we're going to say to you, try to get in here just a little bit earlier, because what you're talking about, I think we touched on it. Is the mental health profession better at naming problems than it is at solving problems? Can someone speak to the racial, gender, and class historical harms perpetrated by the mental health profession? Well, they call them the therapists, the rapists. Now,
no, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, I'm not. So let me get rid. Let me vouch for myself because I'm a therapist. But Ron, I want to hit that before you get there. There was something called drapetomania. I don't think people know that, because if you ran away from back then, Black folks had a mental health issue, was considered to have a mental health issue if you ran away. Okay, drapetomania. Benjamin Rush came up with it, is because of the color of skin. So mental health started out on racist grounds. Sigmund Freud started out on a lot of the stuff. Maybe Jung, Carl Jung, Jung, may be one of the very few. All right. But there's a whole racist kind of network when you start from the historical reference as it relates to mental health therapy. Okay. So that's because that's one of the reasons we never got all into it because how it was addressed initially of how we thought, how we looked at stuff, how we perceived things all along. So when you start looking at the history of mental health, there is a racist, significant racist. So now they're talking about colonialized therapy, is that maybe that is a hindrance and maybe an issue, because a lot of times you go to a lot of therapists, and I'm not cutting down, Anglo therapists at all, but a lot of them are not culturally aware of how to interact, okay, and have a clear understanding of the global kind of aspect, the holistic kind of aspect. I'm involved, in a curriculum going all across the country. And one of the things we recognize is that there's a term called cultural responsivity. Because if you're not culturally attuned how to address particularly Black people and know what they say, how they say it, the terms, the staccato terms, how they think, how they look at the world from a spiritual, mental, street, structure, educated. If you don't know all of that, a lot of times you are totally lost when you're talking to Black people per se. So mental health has a long way to go. And this profession is taking off, and strangely enough, more Black males are needed because the kind of money that we make in mental health right now, and we're lacking Black male therapists as well as female therapists, and the kind of money to be made and needed is certainly essential. Ron, you can back that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna be as kind as you are to our counterparts, because I've dealt with that. They will put you in schizophrenia if you come in there talking about the issue, and they'll say it's your fault. You don't even have a reason to be. Why are you trying to be a victim? Why are you trying to be a victim? Because we're not allowed to be victims, because we had to have resilience. Everything that happened to us, we need to have resilience of it. We can't sit down on our laurels, and that's a very difficult point. And I agree with Brother Guy. We need to be able to get more mental health psychologists, social workers, all of them to really come together to begin to look at an ideology for our people. One of the biggest problems that we have is that everybody else got an ideology. When you go to the Asian community, they got an ideology on what they're doing, what their purpose is. You go to the Hispanic community, every individual, culture of them, they have an ideology of what they're doing. Our oppressors have a big ideology of what they got planned and what they're doing. We're just holding on to the coattails and waiting for the crumbs to fall off and say how many more crumbs we got than the other one of us. And we have to get out of that and look for where's our ideology. And it comes back into this idea of knowledge of self. I think that once we don't look at ourselves and look at the trauma, the true traumas that we have faced first, because all of the I can't get along, divorce, daddy's not being here, baby mamas, all that stuff first have to deal with who we are and understanding that. I've said this many times, and people said, Black people in America, because I believe that we come from so many different places, you're trying to put us again in a box and fix us when we may have to go trace our ancestry back to our place and see what works for them in that region before we can get fixed. The number one trauma you see for a child is not having parents and not knowing where they come from. We as a people are in that boat. Somebody said, "Oh, the African people come over, they successful." But guess what? They'll trace who they are, and their values and morals and all that trace back to wherever they came from. Hispanic people, same thing. They trace everything back to where they came from. We're tracing our stuff back to what? We don't even know. We don't even know if we was Christian, if we was spiritual, if we was Muslim. We don't know anything. We just know whatever our last name is now is based on the oppressor that we had that gave it to us, and we begin to be resilient around that, and we have to face that idea that we got to let go some of that resilience, identify what is our true traumas, and then be able to move on. And Guy, you can talk about this. No person in treatment can resolve their treatment, substance abuse treatment, until they deal with the real issue.
That's true.
The real issue ain't the drugs, ain't the alcohol. It's the real thing that's causing you to be vulnerable for the drugs. And that's what we have to do as a people. Begin to look at what is our, I know I have long valuations, self-analyzations of myself, just to be the kind of man that I am today. And I equate some of it back to the trauma that I've had in my life, but also once I know I have the trauma, then I have the means to try to work beyond trauma. And then I use my resilience, not just using my resilience on not knowing my trauma. That's what we kind of been. We kind of just, we're gonna be resilient, but don't really ever address what our real trauma was and why we acting like this. We're just gonna be resilient on top of that. And that's like compounding a lot of issues into us as people.
And know where we come from. Know about Negro. Why don't we know about Negro land? Why do we don't know about Benin? Why don't we have an understanding of what went on in the Sudan as relates to all this, okay, the Jewish kind of stuff? We don't know enough about ourselves, of the greatness of who we are. Why don't we know what happened to Spain and went into Portugal and then went into Africa, and then we really went on the transatlantic? That's who we are.
So Massa Musa changed the whole world.
Right. Until we get to know who we are and the names when we got off the transatlantic, what our real names was. And if you go into Savannah, Georgia, if you look on the pews of the real names of who we are, okay, that'll clear understanding. So we got to get out of this slave kind of mentality, okay, of what we have, because when we recognize all of this and who we are and how we are, okay, and the trueness of what we are, and then that will provide us the kind of resiliency, okay, from a cultural kind of perspective. And I think it'll give us a different mindset, but we still have to take responsibility for our own. We keep thinking that Mr. Charlie's going to change, and y'all forgive me. That's not in his best, okay, many of them not his best interest to change. We got to change. Okay, so while people, the lawyers and everything else is on one side of the track doing that, that's not going to be me. Forgive me. I'm over here saying, what can we do collectively? What can we do economically? We're dealing with a gentrified neighborhoods all across America. What the heaven are we doing? You know why? Because people of color are being impacted because they're being forced to move out of their neighborhood. That's a major mental health issue, okay, that they can't afford to live in their house that they've been living in for the last 40 or 50 years. That was called the ghetto. Damn it, we ain't never had a ghetto. It was called Get To It. Never a ghetto. They've been getting to our neighborhood, and we got to wake up. Stop. We keep talking about, well, everything going to change. And hell, it's not. So when are we going to change? So
and that's the thing.
Solutions focus. I'm sorry.
You know, and Guy, you're right. We do need some solutions, and we do need, and that solution looks at us every day in the mirror, and we have to look at things that we have let what others have done to us. Now, we do have folks that, just like folks, and we had a nurse, Ms. Beeson, on, just like when you find out that the reason why fibroid tumors may seem hereditary is because you're eating the same thing that your mom and your grandmama ate, and you also have the stressors of it. But a lot of things that are happening to us, you have generational. We have started having like legacy generations of folks who say, well, my mama got food stamps and my grandmama got it and my great grandmama got it. And so young girls get pregnant, they go get food stamps. And you look at what is happening with what we're doing. If we stop, those who have, there's a responsibility, and we're shirking that responsibility because some of us look down on the very children that we have produced, and you cannot do that. I have never heard a white person call a white girl ugly, but I've heard black women and black men call, look at your ugly self. There's just certain things that happen that we need to change, but it comes from within. You mentioned one of what was one of the most powerful institutions and should still be in our church was our churches. And they have more of a responsibility. My position is there were churches that basically shut down during this pandemic. And if you were not there when I was in trouble, guess what? You could keep that door closed when we get over this pandemic. And so we have to look at what do we have? What are those churches doing? We need to help them. But you mentioned about healthcare professionals, which I will say this one thing about folks who work in social work and they work in any type of service area. You have to have compassion. And a lot of folks who are just one paycheck away from being in that line themselves don't know how to treat people when they show up and need help. They go there and they treat them like animals. And that's something they have to work on. But we're talking about, and Bobby, you notice in journalists, lawyers, every profession, education, the teachers who teach our children, and every aspect of life, you have people who are making decisions about us. We should be making decisions. If you pick up the latest issue of Texas Metro News, well, the one last week, we are our person of the year is Deion Sanders. It's not just because he's a football player and what he's done for Jackson State, but what he's instilling in those young men
Revolution.
and what he's also doing for HBCUs and asking those tough questions, how he's shaking up the NFL. It wasn't a light decision made, and we have to look at. I was watching one game, and one of the guys mouthed off at Dion. And Dion shut that down real quickly. And that's what we need to do. There is a hierarchy. There is something, you were talking earlier about the psychological impact. Well, I also watched, so when I watched Claudine and I think it was called Paris in Love, I watched Amistad last weekend. And so I was just ready for you all. But anyway, and I watched I watched a sister embrace her baby and then fall off the ship. But guess what? A brother was watching that. That impacts him. And that has an impression on him. When I was in Senegal and we visited, they talked about how, okay, if they captured me and took me to one of those places where they kept us, if I happen to be pregnant, well, you're talking about months. You're talking about sometime years before they got around to getting me on a ship and on my way over here. Well, guess what? If I had a child, depending on how old that child was, that child, that shows the inhumanity of folks we don't like to call out there, that critical race theory we don't like to call out there. The inhumanity in them said, kill those children rather than have a little if you just had to let them go and let them wander and hope that they'd get raised by bears or something or animals, but no, they would kill the children. And you look at what has traumatized us over and over again. In the movie Sankofa, and Holly Garima came and spoke to my class, he talked about that womb, this precious womb. We haven't respected, and sadly, our brothers have not respected the womb of the woman. We have not kept it secure. We have not praised it enough so that, I had said at one point, I don't know why I was watching Lifetime television. I had to get off of it because it'll make you suspect everybody of everything. But anyway, I said, I wouldn't want to tell my husband that I was pregnant these days because they'll kill you. Because that is what was happening. But I'm caring about us and the sanctity of us and saying, if you don't do it, I'm like, if you don't do it, show some love to a Black woman. Hold the door open for them. Black women, if your man hold the door open for a woman, don't look at her sideways. Say he better hold the door open for you. We have to change by our actions with everyone. We have to stop looking for the negative, and that is what our kids pick up on, and how if we want to change this, it begins with each of us teaching and passing it on. And no matter how tired you get, you have to understand you're not just doing it for yourself, but for future generations. And the person you save may be, and I want to hear an answer from Guy and Ron, because y'all didn't answer my question about when they bring the kid home. But how did you feel when you heard Whitney Houston's brother saying, he's like proudly proclaimed that he turned his sister up? Now, I do know that we're using drugs to medicate ourselves to help us forget the state that we're in. But How did you feel about that? If any of you did, either of you see when Michael Houston said, he let it be known, because people have been giving Bobby Brown a bad rap for a long time, saying he turned Whitney out.
True.
Exactly.
And I said, y'all don't know East Orange, New Jersey. That's where I grew up from, but how did you feel just hearing that? And what does that say about his mentality? He sounds proud saying it.
Well, I'll speak directly to some of the things you spoke about in reference to that. I think that we forget sometimes that we have been sexualized as people in general, and as a race of people, as a group of people. So the idea of a black man having an idea to respect the woman's womb wouldn't even he wouldn't think about that unless he had knowledge to respect the womb, because slave master didn't respect the womb. Nor did the slave master respect his orifices when he decided to do whatever he wanted to do with them as sexual objects, and the wife wanted to do these things. So some of the stuff that we really look at, and I love when we talk about some of our social ills, because we look closely, a large majority, and we always say, why we like that and other people not? Well, other people didn't go through that trauma like we did. It's really easy to say, oh, they can't, all they want to do is have sex all the time. Well, guess what? They were conditioned to do that every night. The man got to go to 3 different women's rooms and have sex every night to be producing more stuff, more kids. Because that's what they needed. And we act like it didn't happen. I say sometimes we don't realize that we start comparing ourselves to other people and not realizing these people didn't go through our trauma. And one thing I love about the Jews is that they do not let you take any of their trauma and push it that it wasn't their trauma. And we do it all the time. We make it like our fault for our trauma. What happened to us and what we do now today is all our fault. Not saying that we can't take some accountability, but we got to know to be able to take accountability. Many of the people are not self-aware enough to know accountability, to say, this, like even young men today, I'll give you a perfect example. Young men today who wear their pants down all the way below their butt. If you was to tell them that was a prison thing for the man that, was that easy access, they would say, they're disregarded. They'll say, oh, well, it's cool. The girls like it. And it's a thing. But it's knowing the history of some of the things that we're doing and being able to analyze and discuss and have a real conversation about, this is not us. These are narratives that have been told to us that is appropriate, and they're not appropriate. But it takes to have those conversations.
I'm appalled. To answer your question, I was appalled that he would, brag about, giving something to his sister. But we have made in our culture, unfortunately, a segment of our culture that everything that is destructive is cool. Okay. And when we get to a point of thinking that it's cool to be destructive in our own people, it's very cool to say, I'll kill a nigga. You know what I mean? I'll knock a nigga out. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll sell him some dope. Somebody's got to sell him. But we're in our own self-destructive mode. So we've got to get out of this whole theoretical kind of way of how we look at ourselves and that self-destruction, and go back to a constructive mode. Because when we had less and we were in a more challenging situation, we invented everything. Think about this. We invented everything. That mop, that air conditioner, everything, when we have nothing. Nothing. So until we get back to the basics of loving one another, and I think we are in this country at odds between the black man and the black woman. We've got to come together as a team to show that kind of family love, family that we're working together, because what they have done to us, they placed upon is to put the black woman up, okay? But guess what? I got 2 daughters. I need a black man to be with my daughter, to marry my daughters. So if we're at odds as each other, and they're smart enough to do that. Remember, they used to do fights a long time ago and take the dirt and put it in the middle. So what we've done is we've thrown the dirt on the black man, and now we are fighting each other. And they're sitting back laughing like, look at them two fight each other. But as long as we stay at war with one another and say, look, we need the black man to go to college. We need the black man to get a trade. We need to work with each other. But as long as we fighting each other, and while we're fighting each other, we're focusing on them. No, we need to stop fighting each other and come to our own resolution, address our own issues amongst each other and stop talking about each other. Lastly, we would never take white women in some of these rap stuff and take white women and put them out there, and let them dance and shake their behind and everything else. We would never do that. So we got to take responsibility to say, no, hell no, that's not acceptable. We're not going to talk about each other. And if we do have problems, let us quietly come together and resolve them and talk about them. But we go public, and shame ourselves and embarrass ourselves. So that's a lot of the wars. And guess who's watching all of this on, TikTok and everything else, Facebook and everything else? Our kids. And you remember Regina King's son, notice what he said, Did anybody look at what was some of those issues that what he said before his incident occurred? That social media, that what we are addressing across this country is we've got to be much more positive with each other as opposed to some of the destructive things that we're doing against each other.
Okay.
You said a lot, and I just wanted to say this one thing that one of my reporters went to a ball, the Dallas Mavericks, the champions, had this ball.
Okay.
And she said the only person with a black wife was Dirk Nowitzki. I'll just leave that there for you all.
Hey, guy, can I ask you a question? Guy, you was the first time you were speaking, and once you said the other thing, it blew out my mind. You were talking about when you first started speaking. What was that point you was making? I'm sorry.
Which one? I don't.
When you first came, I know. I mean, I wish I had a pen to write it down because I was going to. I think you were talking about. Oh, I know exactly what it is. You were speaking about the war that is going on between the black man and the black woman, and how right. that at some point we are falling deeply into that, and we don't see that as becoming even more self-destructive than our allegedly black on black crime issue.
Correct.
But it is a serious issue because I think that when I especially when I'm dealing with this idea of a man feeling in, because one of the things someone's saying, this black man has an ego, he's insecure that I'm getting all of these, I'm working my way. And the first thing I thought about is, they had a whole show one time about black girl magic. And I said to myself, what does that mean for the young black boys? We don't care, we don't want them to have any magic. And we have to look at these small microaggression things that occur and begin to realize that every day you see more and more of this idea of why wouldn't I want the black woman to be higher than, why wouldn't the oppressor want the black woman to be second to him? Because he can push his woman, who he oppressed all the time, that we act like we don't know and don't see. He oppresses his woman way beyond what we could ever imagine. Because if he puts the black woman at the head of the black community, we could never compete against them ever again, because his own woman can't compete against him. So how could our black woman be able to compete against him in the protection realm of what happens? And so, and a lot of times people will jump and say, well, I don't need no protection, I'm strong. But we do need that. One of the biggest things you hear women say when they say they want a man who they can feel safe, who will protect them, who will take care of their family, but then turn around and say, well, he can't take care of me. Well, he can't take care of me because the system has made it to make sure he couldn't take care of you. And you have now fell into the groove of saying, oh, he can't take care of me. Well, really, he still can, because if you come together and start thinking about me and him and start thinking about us. Because if you're getting $100,000, he getting $40,000. Guess what? You got $140,000 if you're working together.
If you got character.
And I hear what you're saying. I hear, and as and I would just tell you this. I hear very few women say they don't need a man to take care of them. But when I've heard them saying it in conversations with me, maybe the articulation is not as solid or as broken down as it needs to be, because a lot of women are saying, I don't need a man to take care of me financially and all of these things. I need him. I need you for all the other things. And the other things are not just sex, because we're big on intimacy. And this is another show, but I know that a lot of women, and having taught on a college campus, there was a time I was in a discussion with Black college presidents, and they were saying that they had seen a surge. You had the brothers were complaining because they were on campuses where you couldn't have interroom visitation. The brothers were saying sex was still going on because you had these women who were turning out women. Because guess what they were giving them? They were giving them intimacy. They were giving, the hugs, the spooning. Do you all know what spooning is? Y'all don't know?
Yeah, we know
What
what
you
all
say,
that
Bob?
is. Yeah, I mean, you can do that if you're not dealing with the
No,
everyday.
y'all don't like to do it.
No,
Just
that's not. I think that's not true, sister Smith. That's not true. But you have to
I'm not
also
saying
look
all
at.
of you, but a lot of you as
No,
soon as
no,
you
we love to be able to do that,
all
Sister
love to
Smith.
spoon.
We would love to, but we might spoon too hard and the police busting us and kill us. So we're thinking about that instead of spooning, Sister Smith. I'm just keeping it real because we like to say we would like the romantic world that the white man and white woman have, but we don't live in that luxury as Black men many times to have those luxuries. We have
And
so
see,
many
and that's
things.
the interesting thing, because television, and again, you look at the things that have impacted us, because the media,
That's true.
until people see it, they don't think it happened. So they didn't think we kissed. They didn't think that y'all walked up to us and patted us on our butt, or did those terms of endearment, or that we laid in bed together like Claudine and I forgot what his
Well, that
name.
movie impacted you. Lord have mercy, that movie impacted you.
It did.
Yeah,
It
I
did
do.
on so many fronts.
But
Because you
Sister
saw a
Smith,
man who was trying to hold it down and
Sister
wanted
Smith,
to take care of his woman, and he was also intimate. And that's the thing, we look for intimacy, not necessarily sexuality. And we need for you to not just I'd rather you not give me anything on Valentine's Day if every other day you ignored me. Don't come in here into my house, trying to show me love on Valentine's Day, because it's all those other days when sometimes I just need a hug. And speaking about this, and Guy and Ron, you can address this, because I can tell you that since this current and other pandemics, as we deal with all the ills, the social violence and everything that we've dealt with in our communities, and poverty and everything, I can still, see you, Guy, and give you a hug. Sometimes that hug is all you need to get you through the day sometimes. But with the pandemic, it was like, don't touch anybody. Don't touch anybody. And so we needed that intimacy is gone. And it's interesting because coming from Jersey, we weren't doing a lot of hugging. We kind of distant from one another. But now it's kind of like, oh gosh, I need a hug. And people are articulating that more. I need the intimacy. I need to feel good. And we're past the days when you all used to come home from work and your wife say one thing to you and you want to beat the crap out of her because you done took it all day from the man, and you'll be darned if you're going to take it from her. And my question is, well, do you love the man? Because you say you love me. So if you so bad, go beat his butt. Don't come home and beat mine and take it out on me. We want the intimacy. We want to feel sexy. And I know as we get ready to wrap it up, you say, you don't look sexy in that bonnet.
Well, we've been 90 minutes. Lord have mercy.
Yeah, let's do this, y'all. And look, it is this. Now you're getting into the meat of stuff, so we're gonna leave that alone. So if you could just take 30 seconds, Miss Smith. I know that's kind of difficult since you're from Jersey.
And I'm with all these men in 30 seconds is usually for you all.
We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this in 30 seconds. If everybody can take 30 seconds, then let's wrap it up. You hit some very valid points, but can we just bam it home in 30 seconds? Some hope for us in our relationships. Okay, Sure, we're
some hope in our relationships. Just like Chuck D, a Public Enemy, said, stop looking for a leader and be one. Or that hand you're looking to for help is at the end of your wrist. I'm just saying that we have to look at ourselves and we have to find that love. Dick Gregory talks about, can you be lovable? We have to, whatever we put out there can change hearts, can change. If you're even talking to somebody on the phone, it's a difference in the way you treat the bill collector that calls you that can make all the difference in the world. And, we say it in Delta, the greatest of these is love.
Ron?
Listen, Smith said so much stuff in my mind over here, and I almost went. But just to say this, I think that as a people, when we're looking at relationships and we're looking at how we have been affected, we have to do real strong self-evaluation. And sometimes of some of our self-evaluation, we also have to be able to be vulnerable and be able to validate our partners. And I think of sometimes the idea of what we want to have and what we have, we sometimes have to make we have to as I would say, make a compromise. I love the idea of being able to love my partner and give them everything, but sometimes that's hard when I don't know what love is and I'm not feeling. I have not yet been able to define it in my lifespan because I have not seen any love. And then the idea of someone wanting me to do something that I don't even know what it is. So yeah, I'm going to bring you something on Valentine's Day because I'm following the trend what everybody else is doing. And so I think that we have to begin to really start evaluating what we want from our partners and what we want from our families, what we want from our community, based on what we understand about ourselves and what we know we have or don't have to give. And that's where we can kind of come and start to work to move our families and our community forward.
Mr. Willett?
Yeah, I think we need to go back. I ask that we go back to our basics, okay, of loving loving ourselves, loving our family, loving our community, and allow the what we call good orderly direction or whatever our God conscientious concepts to start working together. And we must unite, as a family of people in a beautiful culture that we have, and do everything that we can to progress, because and leave a generation that is behind us that is dying right now, and give them a source to something to live by constructive means.
Mr. Busby?
Well, Cheryl, Guy, Ron, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. This has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we couldn't solve all of these problems in 90 minutes. But thank you all for giving us something to chew on, something to ponder. And, I would just leave this with that we should all concentrate on healing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Before we can get to love, before we can get to any of these things, we have got to heal ourselves. And, don't have a prescription for that. It's a life journey. But thank you all for giving us some good medicine and even some care packs to take along the way. So thank you, and hope to have you back soon.
Yeah. I too acknowledge and agree with Perry's sentiments concerning the need in each one of you. There was a comment that came across, and I want to read that from Sabrina before I do that. We are spending this month, the next 2 weeks, as we did the first 2 weeks, on our mental health, understanding that our Black history is based upon or dependent upon our mental health. If we don't have that, we're not going to have no history. The history that we do have is warped. And in understanding our mental health, we begin to understand us because we're dealing with it from the true aspect. Now, our next week topic, we're going to deal with, again, the post-traumatic slavery syndrome, but we're going to deal with juvenile justice and how that is affected. And the panelists, outstanding panelists again, Miss Anna Henry, that has a very interesting story. So please, no relationship other by blood, but by us being childs or children of God, we are related. And then our community servant, Mona Lisa Weber, will be with us next week. Our public defender, Gordon Weeks, and then Dr. Sonny, God pronounce his name. Is it Etienne?
Etienne.
Etienne. Yeah, Sonny Bad Boy.
Sharp brother.
Sharp
So
brother.
get into some deep stuff. Now, if you would, Ariel, could you pull that comment up by Miss Beeson? Oh, Ariel might have.
She's so prolific.
Yeah, here she goes. She says we need to have the mindset of walking side by side instead of one in front of the other. Each role is important, powerful, much needed conversation. So let's begin to walk beside each other instead of behind or in front of. And we can do that once we understand, like you all have so eloquently noted. Thank you too, Ms. McCleary, that we have to know who we are. And I want to leave you with this.
The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And as Muslims, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us to respect our women. And to
not only are our black women, but this is an equal opportunist with systemic racism and hatred. So yeah, the black woman is disrespected. However, the black man is disrespected too. So until we come together and address this issue, so we can put that right where it needs to be, because it will come from both of us, not just one of us, but both of us. And collectively, we can do it better than we can singly. The word says, where ropes are combined, they're stronger than just one strand. So let's come together, folk, for all of us, not just for some of us. God bless you all. Have a great evening, and we will see you next week as we continue this dialogue. Good night, everybody.